Hey, what's up guys? Node Investor here. Want to bring you guys an update. I've been taking it a little bit slower this week. It's been kind of an off week for me, just taking a little time off. I will be doing some travel for the next couple days, so we'll not post any more updates until later in the weekend at earliest. But I wanted to bring an update here today as we take a look at these markets. There certainly has been some movement. The altcoins, there's quite a few pretty significant pumps, rallies, whatever you want to call it, here in the last day or two. So I want to point out a few of those names that I'm keeping an eye on, as well as some fears, some FUD in the Tether space again. But there's just been a lot of news, and it continues to be in this space. But you can see here on the chart, I have the total cryptocurrency market cap, and you can just tell from the last month and a half, basically since August, we've just been this very flat, very small movement market, very tight action, continues to be watched. You definitely want to be paying attention during this time period, because these periods of very small, very tight, low volatility action doesn't tend to last very long, generally speaking, in this space. And so I'm on the lookout for some potential movement out of this range, whether up or down, here in the next month or so. So just something to keep an eye on. Want to pay attention to this. And if you look at the coin market cap going back, let me go to the last year, you can see the BTC dominance has started to decline since middle of September, and that's been largely due to some of the big caps that have had some pretty good rallies. We saw ETH have a pretty good rally off of the lows, and then Ripple had that monster run a couple weeks ago, and then Bitcoin Cash. And so some of those big cap names have certainly shaved off a little bit of percentage from here, but now we're starting to see a little bit of the smaller mid cap names showing a little bit of a bid here. So definitely liking that action near term. So we'll see if this can continue to drive lower, if the alts can gain some more traction to the upside. So let's take a look at the charts here. Oh, before I get started, before I forget here, we are opening up the private Slack group right now. So I'm in the middle of adding new members to the October month. Technically it starts October 7th, whatever this the end of the weekend is, and it'll go through the first weekend in November. And so if you want to join our group, it's very educational in nature. We certainly share trading ideas and setups, but there's also good articles, there's a watch list, there's a good commentary, and we even have some other channels for non-crypto stuff, Forex and stocks for those that are interested. But it certainly is primarily a crypto focused group. So if you're interested in joining, if you want to learn more about trading or just being involved with other folks in the space, check that out. You can check that out at nodeinvestor.com. Go to the training page, and there will be a link with more information as to how to sign up and get started with that group. So go check that out. So let's go take a look at the charts here real quick. Go into BTC. You can see just the reflection that's in the coin market cap chart, right? You can see how narrow the price of Bitcoin has been. And then more specifically, for the most part, right, over the last half of September and now that we're into October, you can just see how narrow this price is getting. Now, when we're zoomed in very closely and watching the 4-hour charts, the 1-hour charts, these moves feel like huge rallies, right? You get a couple $100 move very quickly, but in the big scheme of things, it's just a very tiny movement. And so just something to keep an eye out here, because this is certainly continuing to coil up, and you can see there's some intermediate levels that I'm starting to watch here in the near term as some of this price action really starts to get narrow here over the last couple of weeks. Looking at the chart of Ethereum, it's very similar price action here, and I'll cycle back to BTC here so we can zoom in on some of the details. But you can see ETH, very narrow price action here. I've got a symmetrical triangle drawn out, something I'm watching for a potential breakout. If it can start to close above that 232, that will show some bullish action, potentially taking it up to the prior high around 253, and then maybe up to that next resistance level in and around that 265 to 270 range. But same type of pattern, just very tight, very symmetrical type of action as this price range really starts to coil. And this is the daily chart, mind you, so this is a longer term, right? It's not an hourly chart or anything like that, but something to keep an eye on here. You can see volume is declining as this pattern continues to build, so definitely make note of that. The volatility is drying up, the movements are getting smaller, and you can see RSI is just kind of in the middle of the road here, and so could go either way, absolutely. Just something I'm keeping an eye on here near term. Let's go back to BTC here. So there's been something important to make note of. I track prices on 4 major exchanges on my watch list. I watch prices for Coinbase, Binance, Bitstamp, and Bitfinex, and generally they're within a very tiny percent of each other. They're usually pretty close, but I've noticed over the last couple of days the price ranges for the USD Tether exchanges, so Binance and Bitfinex, have been about $40 to $50 higher than the others, and that is because there's been a little bit of a decline in the, in the Tether. There was a little bit of a pullback in the Tether pair, and you can see here there's another stablecoin that Binance lists, USD Tether pair versus True USD, and we've had this happen before. A couple weeks ago there was another big spike in True USD, and so it's just real interesting because these are technically supposed to be stablecoins pegged to the $1 equivalent in and around there, and for the most part they usually are, but we had this little spike a couple weeks ago, and then here in the last couple of days we've seen that run up again, and this is largely contributing to that delta that we're seeing here in those exchange prices. You can see, $6,500, $6,590 on one exchange, $6,540, and it's not a huge difference, but it's unusual generally to see that sort of a difference, because usually there's arbitrage players that will take advantage of any real price difference on the exchanges, but in this case it's due to the Tether difference and some of the value change there. So just something interesting to watch there. But let's go back to the BTC chart. So near term, here's what I'm watching. Going to the 4-hour chart, we had a pretty good push off the lows yesterday. It looked like it was rolling over again. ETH started to crack, broke below that lower trend line support in the short term, and then just never followed through to the downside, just like we've seen here in recent past. You get the move higher, and then it kind of just pauses. You get the move lower, looks like it's breaking down, and it reverses. We saw that again yesterday. You had that pullback lower, looks like things were rolling over again, and then it just bottomed out, and then late yesterday had the big push higher. And so in the near term right now, that 4-hour chart is looking pretty decent here, setting up a potential little bull flag off of the lows, waiting for that moving average to start inverting again, but looking good. Some good buy volume came in yesterday. I'm liking the way it's setting up, but keep in mind this is still within this bigger picture, but this is the first step if potentially this is going to start to break to the upside. So definitely something I'm watching here. Here's the 1-hour chart. You can see is just very constructive pullback, bigger green bars on the volume side, meaning there's more accumulation happening as this consolidation takes place. Not a lot of selling so far following the big push higher. So definitely something to watch here. I'm watching this for a potential second leg up, and if we can move up, then first resistance is going to be around that 6640, and then ultimately this upper 6700 range, which has proven to be the most recent resistance, 6700, 6800, that little range there. And so not necessarily looking for a straight move up, but if it can start to stair step its way higher, that will be positive. The main thing is, as long as BTC holds up and doesn't start to roll over, I'm really just focusing on the alts. I prefer to trade the alts because they have a higher beta, and when Bitcoin sits tight or is even moving up, I like the outperformance that some of the alts provide. I still watch BTC because it's a directional indicator for me, meaning if Bitcoin starts to roll over, then I'm going to wait and not be aggressive on the alt side, and vice versa. If it's sitting tight or moving higher, then I'm looking for those trades on the altcoins because they tend to outperform, right? If Bitcoin has a 4 or 5% move to the upside, you're going to see some alts that have double-digit gains. And so that's what I'm going to be looking for. And there's quite a few that are starting to move and set up right now. And right now, really the market environment is good for pullback entries. I'm not chasing anything. I'm not looking for those breakouts. I'm being a little bit more cautious here and taking those pullback entries because that has proven to be the better way to go in this market, just because of the lack of big follow-through that we see. And sometimes you miss some, and that's okay. That's just the price you pay for being a little bit more patient and a little bit more cautious and looking for a better entry point. So a few of the names that I'm watching, Tron, we had Tron breaking out today. Let me show you the Tron BTC chart. You can see how tight it's been sitting here for a couple of days, and this is the 4-hour chart, and here today was flashing on my alert system. You can see it was having a nice move higher, and so right now I'm just watching for this pullback to play out, or this little pause that we're seeing on the 1-hour chart. But that was a nice little move. Same type of pattern on the Tron USD pair, breaking out of a big consolidation pattern on that chart. You can see how tight this was sitting on the dollar chart and now starting to move higher with some good volume. So definitely looking pretty good from that perspective. Another name that's on the list right now is WanChain. And so looking at WanChain, this is the 4-hour chart versus BTC. You can see how narrow this lower support line is just starting to rise and be a good support. Resistance has been clear right around that 1609 area, and it's just bouncing up. And you can almost say there's a little bit of a cup and handle type of formation, but really I'm just looking at the bigger picture here. If it can start to move higher, that's looking good there. On the 1-hour chart, again, was moving, came on the alert system again earlier today. Now I'm watching for this pullback and looking for a reversal, potentially to make an entry on WanChain. IOTA. Now I want to point out the IOTA dollar pair for the daily chart. You can see this long downtrend that has been in place has proven to be a place of resistance every time this attempts a new rally, but this is starting to get really tight here. You can see there's a lower bound that has been holding as support, and so want to pay attention here as this really starts to narrow and constrict the price points. We want to see if this can break to the upside, and so a move above that 60-cent mark would be very positive on IOTA USD. The BTC pair is showing similar price action. Here's the daily chart versus Bitcoin. You can see just how narrow and how tight this price action is getting. Now, to be fair, you can say this is a big descending triangle pattern, which will break lower, but something to keep an eye on, because if Bitcoin can start to turn the corner and move to the upside, I think that's going to add more confidence to some of these alts. So I'm definitely paying attention for potential upside breaks on some of these names. Now, there's been some pretty good moves in some of the small cap space. So here's NAV, looking at NAV here, coming off of this very tight consolidation. It had this false break to the downside and then quickly moved higher. And look at how strong this has been over the last couple of days, posting a pretty decent 26-27% to the peak. It's pulling back right now, so definitely something to keep an eye on for these secondary entry points. But here's the 1-hour chart, just stair-stepping its way higher. Big volume coming up off the top. So now I'm looking for a little bit deeper of a pullback this time, but definitely good to see some of these alts moving higher. A lot of small cap names are showing this type of action right now. I was watching NEM yesterday as it was pushing higher, rolling over right now, so maybe setting up a potential secondary entry as it's testing this breakout point on support, but just had a pretty decent move. And some more obscure type of names, CyberMiles, big push off the lows here and just a lot of volume coming in. So I'm just keeping an eye on some of these chart patterns. You can see a lot of the alts are putting in this big low, this long time base on the daily charts. And there's just a lot of charts versus BTC that are doing this type of pattern, which leads me to believe that a lot of these names have found a low, if not the low, versus Bitcoin. Now, it doesn't mean that Bitcoin's found its low, so the USD pair may still drift lower, but versus BTC, a lot of these names are showing this big base, this big consolidation at the lows. And so I'm starting to get a little bit more excited about the alt space. Primarily for the summer, it's been heavy BTC as far as any holdings that I've maintained. But now I'm going to start paying attention to some of these movements in some of the alts. I'm going to be looking for some of those more high quality names that I would rather hold and enter for more of a position trade type of thing as opposed to just quick day trading, but something I would look to hold for a couple of weeks or even longer. A few more very quickly. Looking at EOS, you can see how tight this pattern is getting. This is the BTC chart versus EOS on the daily, and you can just look at how tight these last couple of days have been on the past week or so. So very narrow, very tight price action. Could it break to the downside? It certainly could. I'm not saying these are all breaking to the upside, but when prices get this tight, this narrow, I absolutely start paying attention, because these very often precede some pretty decent moves to the upside. Another one that I'm liking that's moving right now is 0x. Let me clear some of these lines. It has been trying to form a little bit of a low here. Still needs to clear this resistance. You can see it tried about a week and a half ago. It's pulling back, but just something to watch here in the near term. Basic attention token is another one. Very narrow price action off the lows. And again, these are all daily charts, so kind of a bigger picture view, kind of going back a month and a half or so. But you can see how tight and a big base this is putting in here near the lows. And so just watching these resistance levels, watching the overhead price action, looking for some early signals of some breaks to the upside. And when I do that, I'm paying attention to some of these smaller charts. You know, I'm looking at the volume patterns, and some of these big volume spikes have been triggering some of my power pivot alerts, which is why they're showing up on the radar. And these are good alerts to pick up when something is basing, because it signifies, hey, start paying attention. This thing is potentially starting to move and could break out. So just something I'm paying attention to on some of these names. But there's quite a few of these type of setups, and so I'm liking what I'm seeing. But at the end of the day, like I always say, it's going to come down to what BTC does here in the coming weeks and months. If it really rolls over hard, then I don't expect any of these setups to hold up. But if we can see some positive upside momentum, or even some more sideways action in Bitcoin, as long as it's stable or higher, I do expect some of the alts to show some positive action. So that's what I'm going to be looking out for, guys, over the next couple of days. I will be taking probably the rest of the week off, but if we get any kind of crazy action or whatever, maybe I'll do a live stream and jump on. But until then, thanks for watching, thanks for joining, guys, and I will see you all next time. Take care, everyone.